let's clean up your form and technique, specifically with the row exercise. Now, this is an exercise that I see screwed up quite often, and I want to show you some tips. Instead of focusing on a bunch of different things, we're going to focus on one very important thing, and that is the position of your shoulder and how you're pulling that dumbbell or kettlebell up. So, check it out. We're going to go with the most basic variation first, and then I'm going to show you a couple other row variations and show you that the same method applies to the other ones. So check this out. All right, we're going to start off with our traditional bench-supported single-arm row. Now, whether you use a dumbbell or a kettlebell, the same rule applies, and I'm going to show you with both. So let's start off with the dumbbell. All right. Now, first we want to get set up on the bench. Now, I'm going to be going with my right arm, so I got my left knee on the bench, my right arm on the bench. Now, the first thing we want to look for is making sure that our back isn't rounded like this, and this leg isn't up here. Let's move this back leg, lift that heel up so we're in a more athletic kind of ready stance. Also, try to lengthen your spine. I like to think about pointing the chest forward. So if you see a mirror, you should be able to see your chest in front of that mirror. Now, here's what we're going to do. The way I see most people fuck this up is instead of pulling up towards their hip, they think about pulling it to their chest. So they pull up to the chest. Now notice what's happening to my shoulder. My shoulder's being rounded forward like this, rather than pulling back with the shoulder. All right, it's really hard to pull back and pull to the chest at the same time, especially with heavier weights. All right, so here's how we fix that. Instead of thinking pull to the chest, I want you to think pull towards your hip. All right, pull to the hip, right there. That's gonna fix, number one, kind of having that rounded shoulder at the end position. Number two, it's also going to engage your lat, which is this large muscle right here on the side of your rib cage. Here's the same exercise with the kettlebell. All right, so I'm gonna grab a hold of the kettlebell, make sure my spine is straight, my back leg is ready and active. All right, I'm gonna lift it off the ground and I'm gonna pull towards the hip. Pull towards the hip, not up to the chest like this, towards that hip. All right, another thing that I see people doing as well is over pulling. Think about pulling up as high as they can, driving that elbow back. Ideally, we want your elbow to go just a teeny bit past your rib cage. So instead of trying to pull all the way up to here like this, like you're pulling across your body, just think about pulling up towards your rib cage and hip area, all right? We're placing that weight into our pocket, all right? Now I'm gonna show you a couple other variations with rows and how this same method applies. So here's a variation with a chest-supported row. So we get our chest up on the bench, we grab these guys, instead of pulling up to our chest like this, we pull towards the hip. Again, notice the elbows, they're staying tucked, driving towards the hips, all right? I'm not trying to over pull up like this. Pull towards those hips. Another way, like another trick to clean this form up is use heavier weight. Reason why is because if you're using a light weight, it's really easy to screw it up. If you're using a heavier weight, you're like, I can't lift it up with this terrible form. No duh. So you have to really correct the form if you're using a heavier weight. Let's say we're doing a renegade row. Same thing, all right? I'm not trying to pull this up to my chest like this. I'm pulling this towards the hip. Right there. Say we're doing a tripod row. Same thing, right here. I'm pulling it, whoop, to the hip, making sure that this shoulder isn't rolling forward, but instead kind of pulling back. Pull the shoulder back as we do this movement. So this technique really applies when using dumbbells and kettlebells. It doesn't really apply as well if you're using, let's say, cables or bands. The reason why is because you can adjust the angle of the cable or the band. So let's say we have the cable at a higher angle like this, or pulling down, we don't have to think about pulling it to the pocket, because that's gonna be a weird angle. We wanna try to keep that same angle. So let me show you how this rule can still apply, but instead of stuffing it to the hip, we bring our elbows to a different position, but we still focus on making sure that shoulder's in a good position with my favorite exercise variation, my favorite row variation, the TRX row. This is my favorite row variation, which is using a form of suspension. I got some TRX straps here. You can use gymnastic rings, jungle gym, any kind of form of a band that you could pull on using your body weight. But here's how this same kind of method applies on keeping awareness around where your shoulder's positioned, what your shoulder blades are doing, but not necessarily pulling to the hip. So that action of pulling to your hip applies when using a dumbbell or a kettlebell, but it doesn't really transfer that well when doing body weight. So let me show you here. So I'm gonna lean back here. Now as I pull up, I'm gonna pull up, elbows are gonna come back just a little bit. We're not all the way back here, just a little bit. Think thumbs are gonna be just like the meat of your thumbs are gonna be right in front of the chest. Then we're gonna extend the arms back. We're gonna pull up and extend back. What we wanna avoid is this. We wanna avoid having those shoulders shrugged up and then rolling them forward. If you have really, really overactive traps, which a lot of people do, reset in between each rep. Pull, gently lower, reset those shoulders. Think proud chest when doing this. Pull those shoulders back, pop your chest up while you're doing these rows, right? Again, we're not pulling to the hip. That's a very different exercise when using these straps. But we want to make sure that our shoulders are being pulled back rather than rounded forward, all right? So again, that is the main thing I see when people are doing rows, is their shoulder around forward because they're trying to pull at an odd angle. So as you can see here, what we want to focus on is pulling your shoulders back when doing that row exercise. If you're using a dumbbell or kettlebell, think about pulling it to your hip. If you're using cables or a machine, or you're doing a body weight variation, you just pay more attention to where your shoulder's positioned. Is it rounded forward? Is it shrugged up? If so, think about dropping it down and pull it back. Think proud chest when doing that. Thank you very much for watching this technique video. I hope that cleans up your row exercise form. It's a staple in many, 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 many programs, especially mine. So make sure that you're doing it properly. And if you have any questions, shoot it in the comments. I'll be more than happy to help you. We'll shoot another video. Thank you for watching. Catch you next time.